Hello everyone. Today we are going to study the ninth chapter from Business Laws and Ethics, that is Employees Provident Funds and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952. First, let's see the meaning or objective of Employees Provident Fund. So, this is a social security legislation enacted to provide financial security and stability to employees after retirement or in case of unforeseen events. So let's see the key purposes. This helps to promote savings among employees as well as provides retirement benefits and offer protection in case of old age, disability and death. And the nature of this act is it is beneficial and welfare legislation. So here it means that it is a law made for the benefit and protection of people, especially employees or weaker sections of society. That is, beneficial means it gives some sort of advantage or financial security benefits, and the welfare aims at improving the well-being of the people. So here it says that this law applies to employees who work in properly registered and regulated workplaces, that is companies, factories, offices that are registered with government or labor laws and maintain proper records. Now let's see the three schemes under this act. First one is the Employees Provident Fund Scheme 1952, that is EPF. That is, this provides retirement savings for both employer as well as employees contribute here, and the lump sum amount is paid at the time of retirement or at the time of resignation, which subject to certain conditions. The second scheme under this act is Employees Pension Scheme 1995, that is EPS. So this provides monthly pension after retirement, and this also covers widow pension, children pension, and this is funded partly from employers' contribution. Next, let's see the third scheme, that is Employees Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme 1976. That is, this provides life insurance benefit. That is, in case of an employer's death during service, nominee receives a lump sum amount. So no contribution from employee, and this is the only contribution from employer or the government. Now let's see the applicability of this act. This act applies to establishments, other establishments as well as voluntary coverage. So first one is for every establishment which is a factory engaged in any industries listed in Schedule 1, and this must have an employee capacity of 20 or more persons. Second one is other establishments, that is any other establishments employing 20 or more persons as notified by the central government can. Now let's see the fourth one, that is once applicable. That is, if the act once applies, it continues to apply even if the employee strength falls below 20 later. And now let's move on to the next topic, that is non-applicability of the act. So this act does not apply to establishments registered under Cooperative Societies Act, whereby there are only 50 persons as employees, as well as if they are working without power. The second one is government establishments. So where employees are already receiving provident fund or pension benefits under any other schemes, then this act is not applicable to them. As well as the newly set up establishments, they may get temporary exemptions like. Now let's move on to some important definitions. So the first one is, what is an appropriate government? So this means in relation to an establishment belonging to or under the control of the central government, or in relation to an establishment connected with a railway company, a major port, a mine, or an oil field, or a controlled industry, or a relation to an established having departments or branches in more than one state, the appropriate government is called the central government. And in any relation to other establishment, the appropriate government is the state government. So if the establishment is any one which is mentioned the above, that is the railway company, a major port or oil field, or a controlled industry, then it comes under the central government. And all the other cases or the establishments comes under the state government, and appropriate government comes under section 2 subsection A. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is authorized officer. So this comes under section 2 AA, and this defines as authorized officer as the Central Provident Fund Commissioner, Additional Central Commissioner, Deputy Provident Fund Commissioner and Regional Provident Fund Commissioner, or such any other officers as may be authorized by the central government by notification in official gazette. So this is a person appointed by the central government who is authorized to exercise powers and perform duties under this act. Now let's see what is basic wage, and this comes under section 2B. So basic wages means all emoluments which are earned by an employee while on duty or at the time of leave or on holidays. But wages does not include certain things such as the cash value of any consideration or any kind of allowances like dearness allowance, house rent allowance, overtime allowance, bonus or commission, etc., and any presents made by the employer. The next topic is contribution, and this comes under section 2C. So the contribution is any contribution payable in respect of member under any scheme or to one whom the insurance scheme applies. This is known as contribution, and it is paid by employer and employee. The next topic is fund, and this comes under section 2H, and it means provident fund established under this scheme. The next topic is employer, and this comes under section 2E. So employer means in case of an establishment which is a factory, the employer is the owner or occupier of the factory, including the agent of such owner or occupier, or as well as the legal representative of a deceased owner or occupier, and where a person has been named as manager of the factory. So these are the employers in case of a factory. In any other establishments, the person whom the authority holds or who has the ultimate control over the affairs is known as the employer. That is, he will be managing all the things. Next, move on to the next topic, that is what is meant by a factory, and this comes under section G. So factory means any premises in which a manufacturing process is being carried out. And the next topic is occupier of factory, and this comes under section 2K. So the person who has the ultimate control over the affairs of the factory is known as the occupier. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is Employees Provident Fund Scheme under section 5. So this is established or framed for the establishment of provident funds for employees. So this was framed by the central government in 1952, and this came into effect from 2nd September 1952. So let's see the key features of this scheme. So this is a contribution by employer and employee, that is the amount is credited to individual provident fund account and it is paid on the time of retirement or at the time of resignation. And the matters covered under this scheme includes employees covered, contribution rates, withdrawal conditions, maintenance of account and nomination facility. Now let's see the contribution. So the contribution is all about how much goes from your salary. So let's understand it. So as per section 6, both employer and employee pay 10% of basic wages plus dearness allowance and retaining allowance. And for some notified companies, it's 12%. Employee can pay extra voluntarily, that is known as voluntary provident fund. That is, the employee can choose to put more money into PF than the required 10% or 12%, but the employer is not required to match that extra amount. That is, the employer only has to pay 10% or 12% of the basic wages as per the law, and nothing more than that. For example, If your basic salary plus DNS allowance is rupees 20,000 and your required PF is you pay 2,000 and your employer pays 2,000, a total of rupees 4,000. But you want a voluntary PF and you decide 5,000 total, and employer still pays only 2,000. So final contribution will be your 5,000 as well as your employer's contribution of 2,000. That is 7,000 goes to PF. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is section 6A of Employees Pension Scheme. So the central government framed employees pension scheme for the purpose of providing superannuation pension, retiring pension, widow or widower's pension and children pension. Now let's see the contribution. So there is no contribution from the employee. The employer is to contribute 8.33% of the basic wages, DNS allowance and retaining allowance. And the contribution is not payable when the employee crosses 58 years of age, since the scheme ceases on completion of 58 years. Let's see section 6C, that is Employees Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme. So the central government made this scheme in section 6C in the year 1976, and this came to effect from 1/9/1976, and this applies to all factories and any other establishments to which the act applies except to tea factories in the state of Assam. And the wage ceiling limit is rupees 65,000 to 15,000, and the insurance benefit shall be an amount between 2.5 lakhs and 6 lakhs. Let's see the contribution. So here the employer pays into the EDLI fund, and the amount is not more than 1% of the employee's basic wages plus DNS allowance and retaining allowance. So employee also pays extra for admin expenses. This is not more than 1/4 of the contribution, and the central government decides this amount from time to time. So for example, if an employee's monthly pay is above 15,000, the contribution is calculated only on 15,000, and this includes basic DNS allowance, retaining allowance and cash value of food concession. So basically, employee deposit linked insurance scheme cover to PF members, and the cost is borne by the employer. And this can be modified under section 7, and that is the central government has the power to add, amend or vary the schemes. So the next topic is central board under section 5A. So the central government constitute a body called Central Board of Trustees, that is CBT. Now let's see the composition. That is, there will be a chairman as well as vice chairman appointed by central government, and central government representatives, state government representatives, employers representatives as well as employees representatives. So the main feature is that the equal representation is given to employees as well as the employer. So there exists a balanced decision making power. Now let's see the functions of central government. This is administered by central board, and these are Provident Fund, pension scheme, insurance scheme. All these are administered as well as managed by central government. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is state board under section 5B. The state board may constitute a state board of trustees, and the purpose is to assist in administrating the scheme, and this involves a composition of representatives from state government and from employees and employers side. And the function is that it advises central board and helps in implementation of schemes and administration at the state level. And the contribution rate is that 12% of wages, and this is paid by employer and employee. And now let's see the reduced rate, that is 10% for certain notified establishments, and the employer must deduct employee share and deposit total amount. Now let's see the wage limit. There's a wage ceiling of rupees 15,000 per month since September 1, 2014. So want PF on full salary above rupees 15,000, then the employee and employer must give a joint request. That is, this rupees 15,000 limit does not apply to international workers. The next topic is withdrawal from the fund. That is, when allowed at the time of retirement, resignation, permanent disability, or migration abroad, the fund can be withdrawn. Now let's see advances from the fund. So the advances are paid for the following purposes, like for any illness in certain cases, or for marriage or post matriculation education of children, or in any abnormal condition such as calamity of exceptional natural flood or earthquakes, and granted to members affected by cut in the supply of electricity or who are physically handicapped. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is section 6A, employees pension scheme. So the central government framed employees pension scheme for providing superannuation pension, retirement pension, widow or widower's pension, and children's pension. So the main objective is simply but to provide monthly pension after retirement. So let's see the contribution of this pension scheme from employer. Out of 12% of employer contribution, 8.333% must be transferred to pension fund. And from the government, 1.16% of wages must be contributed, and from employee, no direct contribution to pension scheme. So as we have already discussed, the employees pension fund is framed by the central government in the year 1995, and this fund consists of 8.33% from employees contribution and 1.16% from the central government. Now let's see employees deposit linked insurance scheme under section 6C. That is, this provides insurance cover to employees, and that is the employer must contribute 0.5% of wages and there is no contribution from the side of the employee. The benefit is that the employee will get a lump sum amount paid to the nominee or to the legal heir on death of the employee. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is determination of money due from the employer, that is section 7A. And here the purpose is to determine the amount due from employee under the act, and this is conducted by the PF authorities, that is the commissioners, and the powers is same as the civil court, that is taking evidence, requiring documents, etc. And the next topic is review of orders under section 7B. That is, the authority can review its own order under section 7A, and so the review is only allowed for certain grounds, and let's see those grounds. So the new and important evidence was discovered which was not known earlier despite due diligence, and the evidence could not be produced at the time of the order, and there was some mistake or there is an error apparent on the face of the record, or there are any other sufficient reason. So only at these grounds any person can review to the same officer who passed the order. The officer can also review the order on his own if satisfied. If there is no valid ground, he will reject it. If the ground is valid, he will grant the review. So here basically section 7B gives a chance to correct errors in 7A orders. Now let's see determination of escaped amount. That is, section C says if the officer believes some PF amount escaped due to employer's omission or failure to disclose facts, he can reopen the case. This can be done within 5 years from the date of the order under section 7A or 7B. Then he passes a fresh order to determine the due amount. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is EPF Appellate Tribunal. So section 7D creates the EPF Appellate Tribunal. It hears appeals against orders under section 7A, B or C, and the tribunal can confirm, modify, cancel the order or send it back. And the important condition is that the employer must deposit 75% of the amount due before the appeal, and the tribunal can reduce or waive this for reasons recorded in writing. Now let's see the protection against the attachment. Section 10 says that the PF amount in a member's account cannot be attached by any court for the member's debts. That is, no one can claim it. Your PF is fully protected. Now the next topic is employer not to reduce wages. That is, under section 12, it says that an employer cannot reduce wages of any employee just because he has to pay PF contribution. That is, direct or indirect reduction is not allowed. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is penalties. So section 14(1) tells that if any person knowingly makes a false statement or false representation to avoid PF payment, he will be punished with imprisonment up to 1 year or a fine of rupees 5,000 or both. That is, imprisonment of 1 year or a fine of 5,000 or both. And under section 14(1)(a), if an employer fails to pay employee's contribution or inspection or administration charges, then punishment is imprisonment up to 3 years. And for default in employee's contribution, imprisonment not less than 1 year and a fine of rupees 10,000. And for any other cases, imprisonment of not less than 6 months and a fine of rupees 5,000. Now let's move on to the section 14(1)(b). So if employer defaults in paying inspection charges under section 6C, the punishment is imprisonment of up to 1 year and not less than 6 months and a fine of rupees 5,000. Under section 14(2), if any person defaults in complying with the act, scheme, pension scheme or insurance scheme, punishment is imprisonment up to 1 year and not less than 6 months up to a fine of 4,000 or both. And under section 14C, for any other contravention where no specific penalty is given, punishment is imprisonment up to 6 months but not less than 1 month and a fine of rupees 5,000. Now let's move on to the last topic, that is offences by companies. So section 14(a) subsection 1 says if a company commits an offence under this act, every person who was in charge of the company and responsible for its business at that time will be guilty along with the company. And that is, the act ensures PF transfer for employees and has strict penalties to ensure compliance. And that's all with this chapter. We'll be coming up with the next videos. Till then, keep learning and keep growing. Thank you.